after President Duterte and his cabinet approved the Education Department's recommendation for a pilot test in low-risk areas. DepEd will implement stricter health protocols during the dry run. Participating schools should enforce frequent hand washing. Face mask and face shield will be mandatory for students and teachers. Under the dry run of face-to-face classes, class size will be reduced to ensure physical distancing. It will also not involve all grade levels, and classes won't happen daily. Classes that work best in a physical classroom will be prioritized, like the Technical Vocational Livelihood Track for senior high school students. DepEd assures that no student will be left behind.
Kaya natin ginagawa ito para ma-complement yung distance learning modality at may siguro na may mas malaking pagkakataon talaga na maging epektibo ang learning process.
Based on the timeline, the DepEd will come up with a list of participating schools before the year ends. The list will be based on nominees presented by regional directors. Nominees only include public schools, as it has yet to be decided if private schools will be included in the pilot run. Once selected, schools, LGU students, and parents will all undergo thorough orientation. The dry run will take place from January 11 to 23. It will be closely monitored by both DepEd and the COVID-19 National Task Force. DepEd stresses the participation of students will be voluntary. Those who will opt out will continue with the distance learning setup. Some parents are on the fence about sending their children to participate in the program.
Ako hindi ako pumayag, tapos yung iba pumayag. Siyempre, yung anak mo mahuhuli doon sa iba na nakadating na doon nakapumasok na gano'n Di siyempre yung anak mo maiiwan, maghahabol pa yun.
Siyempre, mga bata yan, lalo na yung grade 1 ko. Siyempre, sasabihin niya, anong baon mo? Painom naman, ganyan-ganyan. Baka makainom siya.
The program is not optional for teachers, which is why some groups ask DepEd to conduct a health screening for educators. They are seeking assurance that health workers are present during the pilot run.
Paano yung ating mga teachers kung sa kasalukuyan ay wala pa ring sapat na health benefits nga para sa mga teachers natin kapag nagkakasakit ng COVID-19, patuloy na wala tayong mga health clinics sa mga eskwelahan, wala tayong mga nurses.
Speaking on One News The Chiefs, medical experts note that infrastructure and transmission rate among children should also be considered.
Previous studies have shown that maybe they're not, but more recent studies have shown that minors can be spreaders as well, and that could be a problem because as we know, the thing with minors is it's harder for us na pagsabihan sila to wear face masks.
Former NTF COVID-19 advisor Dr. Tony Leachon adds that DepEd should be ready to halt the program once a surge in cases is reported.
Is to do a pilot study in certain academic institutions where you can easily close down just in case there will be a surge in the number of cases.
The dry run will be the basis of policies for the resumption of face-to-face classes. These policies will be recommended to President Duterte by the end of January. Shaila Francisco, we are One News.
Beyond face-to-face classes, the IATF also made several new orders, including the mandatory wearing of face shields. The new resolution requires the wearing of both face masks and face shields outside residences. This would amend the previous task force order, which only requires people to wear face shields upon entering enclosed spaces or establishments such as malls. The palace says this will reduce COVID transmission and it hopes to prevent a holiday surge. The IATF has also approved face-to-face qualifying examinations for insurance agents in areas under GCQ. The task force has also reverted to GCQ, the province of Isabela, save for Santiago City, until December 31. The return to stricter quarantine was requested by Governor Rodito Albano and considered the virus attack rate in the area. Meanwhile, Philippine National Police Chief Debold Sinas is warning that partygoers will be arrested this Christmas season. Sinas says that the dinner events are allowed as long as healthy measures are observed.
We issued the directive based on the IATF that no party should be there. But hindi man pinagdabawalan yung dinner. It's still the discernment of the commanders to implement. The guidelines and specific has been issued.
The United Kingdom is now dealing with a new SARS-CoV-2 strain just a week after the country rolled out its immunization drive. British Health Secretary Matt Hancock said this mutated variant could have prompted the sharp rise in cases in South Wales and parts of England. They're now working with the World Health Organization to find out more about this new strain. The Philippine Food and Drug Administration says vaccine developers may have already taken these mutations into consideration. Vaccine expert Dr. Lulu Bravo notes that shots may trigger antibodies that are effective across variants.
Kung magkamuka yung variant na yon, ang kanyang na-produce is meron din siya ng spike protein. Meron din siya ng spike protein na tutugma doon sa antibodies na nandun sa katawan mo.
Malacanang is defending government's move to acquire 25 million doses of China's Sinovac COVID-19 vaccines. Let's recall that former COVID National Task Force advisor Tony Leachon questioned the move as Sinovac lacks safety and efficacy data. Initial research also shows that it is among the most expensive vaccine candidates. Palace spokesman Harry Roque says Sinovac may be readily available by the first quarter of next year as compares to other manufactured vaccines. But the FDA believes Pfizer will be the first to secure an emergency use approval in the country.
Malaki po ang chance na mag-a-apply sila agad dito sa atin at mukhang hindi naman po sila mahihirapan. Pero yung pong the matter of producing and supplying and allocating supply for the Philippines, yun po ang hindi natin masabi, no? Kung sino po ang unang makakapag-supply nung talaga pong bakuna na maaaring ipadala dito sa atin.
Bohol officially reopened its doors for leisure travel today, but its comeback was quite underwhelming. Our correspondent Gerard De La Peña reports live from the island province. Gerard, how are things looking like there and what happened to Bohol's reopening day?
Well, Robbie, it's really underwhelming as only 6 tourists showed up today on the first day of the reopening of the tourism industry here in Bohol. Well, this place, we are in Panglao Island right now. This place is usually teeming with tourists, but today it's really quiet here. We are actually the first guests of this resort since the lockdown in March, and other than us, the island is really quiet as of this time.
This AirAsia flight going to Bohol carried less than half of its capacity. Passengers were mostly locally stranded individuals, save for Abby, who is going to Bohol for leisure. She had to pull in 5 other friends so that they can form a group of 6, the minimum number required by the provincial government of Bohol for its travel bubble.
Hindi ako natatakot kasi alam ko kung paano ko kinukondisyon yung sarili ko, yung katawan ko. So, parang I take naman yung kahit anong klase ng virus.
The provincial government had opened Bohol last November 15, but only for meetings, conferences, and exhibitions. Even then, less than 50 travelers went to the province. It's only today, December 15, that the island province opened for leisure travel. Bohol has strict health protocols in place to ensure that its locals will not be infected with COVID-19. Tourists must submit negative swab test results as well as confirmed hotel and plane bookings. They must also have a confirmed booking with accredited transport operators. Their itineraries have to be pre-approved by the Provincial Tourism Office. Tourists also have to download the Trace app, which will be used in the airports. Each tourist will be assigned a QR code, which will be helpful in contact tracing and preventing the spread of COVID-19. They can only stay in the province up to 5 days. Anything more than that warrants another swab test and quarantine of up to 14 days. Once negative, tourists may move around the province once again within the time period.
Kung galing ka sa Manila, lilipad ka dito, you're going to come in, you stay within the bubble of your hotel first. Kasi hindi ka pwedeng kung saan-saan nga pupunta. Alright? Because hindi ka pwedeng makihalubilo. Hindi ka pwedeng makihalubilo sa locals.
Airlines meanwhile assured tourists that they take extraordinary measures in preventing the spread of the virus.
Marami ng mga pag-aaral na nagsasabi na pinakaligtas, kumbaga 1 in a million yung tsansa na makakuha ka ng COVID-19 sa loob ng eroplano dahil nga multi-layered yung approach natin to safety.
Airlines are optimistic that more travelers will book their tickets to Bohol in the coming weeks, especially since the island was one of their busiest domestic routes before the pandemic.
Robbie, it's quite a hassle fulfilling the requirements coming over here, but the provincial government of Bohol is not really keen on easing their restrictions. As of now, they only have 69 active COVID-19 cases, and the provincial government is really trying to protect the locals from getting infected with the COVID-19 virus. So for those who are intent on coming here, you don't have any choice but to follow the rules imposed by the government here. Robbie.
Maraming salamat, Gerard de la Peña. We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, from murder to mental harm, the International Criminal Court says there is reason to believe that crimes against humanity were committed in the course of President Duterte's war on drugs. And with transmission rates in NCR already above threshold, the Octa research team says the country is now on its third wave of cases. The details later. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. The International Criminal Court says it found a reasonable basis to believe that crimes against humanity were committed in the course of President Duterte's war on drugs. Those supposed crimes would include torture, physical and mental harm, as well as murder. To give us more details on this, we have One News Chief Correspondent Ed Lingao. Ed, we know government has been refusing to let investigators come into the country from the ICC. What does this actually change, if anything?
To begin with, the finding is clearly important because
we seem to have technical difficulties. We'll try to get back to that story later. Meanwhile, a Makati court has granted Rappler CEO Maria Ressa permission to travel to the United States to visit her parents for the holidays. But there's a catch. The embattled journalist still needs the approval of 3 other courts before getting full clearance to fly abroad. 2 of the courts handling Ressa's tax charges, while the other one is the Court of Appeals, which has yet to decide on the appeal of her cyber libel conviction. Ressa did not enter plea during her conditional arraignment Tuesday.
This week.
And these are the other big stories today. The Philippines is already on its 3rd wave of COVID-19 infections. This is according to the Octa research team. In an interview with One News Agenda, molecular biologist Nicanor Astriaco said the R0 value increases by 0.01 daily since the start of December and has now passed the 1.0 threshold. This, he says, marks the start of the 3rd wave after the initial bout in March, followed by a second surge in the June to July period. They project at least 500,000 total cases by year-end. The Senate has adopted a resolution asking the Transportation Department to immediately suspend cashless transactions on tollways. The resolution's sponsor, Senator Grace Poe, says now is not the right time to implement a system in which the implementers themselves are not ready and equipped to make the transactions seamless, close quote. Following the RFID MES, NLEX Balintawak opened 4 booths for cash payments. The Senate has ratified a bicameral report on the proposed Financial Institutions Strategic Transfer, or FIST Act. This will allow financial institutions to dispose and transfer non-performing assets and loans. The final version of the bill allows only the private sector to form fist corporations. The BICAM committee also agreed that foreign fist corporations are not allowed in the bidding and foreclosure of real property. The upper chamber also unanimously approved bills extending the availability of funds under the 2020 General Appropriations Act and the Bayanihan 2. Some 148 billion pesos of funds have yet to be utilized under the said laws. More than 50 million Filipinos still have no access to proper sanitation facilities, and nowhere is that more evident than in Barangay Parola in Manila. But how exactly can this dilemma be solved? Will portable toilets do the trick for now? A word of warning for those having dinner as you watch this report from Romel Lopez.
When the call of nature arises, Apple makes sure that this potty comes in handy. But if caught without her weapon, there's always the Pasig River nearby. Apple and majority of the residents of Barangay 275 in Parola in Tondo, Manila face the same dilemma every day.
Ang hirap kasi, pag taing-tay ka na, hindi mo alam kung saan ka tatay. Siyempre, ang hirap sa tabing ilog.
The city's leader, Mayor Isko Moreno himself, had dealt with the same problem growing up.
Nung araw, magsusuman kami. Lalagay mo yun, tapos tutupi mo, tapos mainit-init pa. Lagay mo sa plastic, tapos flying saucer na. Those are the days of my life, which I think nangyayari pa rin hanggang ngayon. Dahil sa maraming mga kababayan natin, wala naman talagang banyong masasabi.
According to the Department of Health, some 50 million Filipinos or 10 million families do not have access to safely managed sanitation services. 24 million of those have limited, unimproved, or no toilet at all. Attaining universal access to toilets will cost the government 30 billion pesos annually. But Project Cubetaco hopes to somehow ease the burden. Through the efforts of local government, national agencies, and international NGO, 400 portable toilets will be distributed in Barangay Parola. Aside from helping residents without proper access to comfort rooms, Project Cubetaco targets to address sanitation, health, and environmental concerns.
Kung mahirap tayo, hindi naman kailangan maging dugyot. May mga pamamaraan naman na mapanatiling yung kalinisan sa kapaligiran.
The waste will be collected 2 times a week, every Monday and Thursday. Residents may also share access to the portable toilets.
Malaking bagay po sa akin. Nakatulad ko, maraming anak na maliit. Mas kailangan ko po to. Dati po, nung wala pa po to, sa ilog po.
The Manila LGU, however, clarified that portable toilets are just temporary solution. Mayor Isko says relocating informal settlers is still their utmost concern to improve their way of life. For News 5, Romel Lopez, we are One News.
Let's get back to that story on the International Criminal Court finding reasonable basis to believe that crimes against humanity were committed in the course of President Duterte's war on drugs. Let's bring back for more details One News Chief Correspondent Ed Lingao. Ed, again, what does this mean for government? What does this mean for the ICC?
Well, Robbie, clearly the finding is important, especially as a first step towards moving towards a full investigation. But it's also important to point out that this is only the first step in a number of complex and lengthy steps in the ICC procedure. You may notice that the prosecutor, Bensouda, acknowledges that she is still to decide on whether to ask for authority to proceed to a formal investigation next year. What we have here after almost 3 years is just a preliminary examination phase. It's like the preliminary investigation of a fiscal in the Philippines before charges are formally filed. Now, see, Bensouda has to cross out 3 elements before she moves forward. First, that there is sufficient evidence showing crimes have been committed, which is what she announced yesterday. Second, that the ICC is convinced that the state itself is not able or unwilling to prosecute violators, and that, I think, is where they are now. And lastly, determine whether an investigation is in the interest of justice. Only after she's checked out all these 3 elements will the prosecutor ask for authority to begin an actual investigation. And only after that is the possibility of having an arrest warrant issued against the perpetrators.
Okay. Maraming salamat, Ed Lingao. We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns. Simbang Gabi officially starts tonight with hundreds of devotees still flocking Quiapo Church for their yearly tradition. And it is official, Joe Biden will be sitting as U.S. President come January 20, 2021. The details next. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. The United States has started its mass vaccination campaign. It started on Monday. Healthcare workers across the U.S. received the first jabs of Pfizer's vaccines, while nursing home residents will be immunized in the coming weeks. This comes as the country's death toll has passed the 300,000 mark. The first person to be inoculated was an ICU nurse in New York who says healing is coming. Vaccine shipments had made it to nearly all of the country's pre-selected 145 distribution sites. And still in the States, it's official. The U.S. Electoral College has confirmed Democrat Joe Biden as the United States' 46th president. Electors began voting across the United States on Monday to formally declare Biden as the next U.S. president. This would put an end to outgoing President Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the results of the November 3 polls. Election results showed Biden winning 306 electoral votes. That far passes the 270 needed to win. Biden delivered a forceful speech in the aftermath of his official win in his hometown of Delaware. He claims democracy prevailed. He and his running mate Kamala Harris are due to take office January 20 next year. Now to sports, a look at the game with Laura Lima.
Thanks, Robbie. The Interagency Task Force has approved the Philippine Olympic Committee's request to resume training for the upcoming Tokyo Olympics. The POC's proposed bubble-setting training camp will be a major boost for national athletes whose training was affected by the COVID lockdown. As of today, the only athlete participating in the Tokyo Olympics training locally is boxer Irish Magno. Fellow boxing Olympian Yumir Marshall is currently in Los Angeles preparing for his first professional fight, while pole vaulter EJ Obiena and gymnast Carlos Yulo are also training abroad. The 20-year-old Yulo recently won 2 bronze medals in the All Japan Gymnastics Championship held at the Takasaki Arena on Sunday. In hoop news, 30 Ravenna has officially been selected to the Japan B-League's All-Star team. The Neo Phoenix import will play for B White and will also be participating in the dunk contest. The 2-day All-Star event will happen this January. Ravenna is currently averaging 9.3 points with 4 rebounds and has recently returned to action for Neo Phoenix after recovering from COVID-19. And that's it and the latest in the world of sports. Catch us again later at 9:30 p.m. here on One News and One Sports Plus. I'm Lara Lehman and this has been The Game. Now back to you, Robbie.
Thanks, Laura. Not even the COVID-19 pandemic can stop churchgoers from attending Simbang Gabi or Misa de Gallo, which starts tonight. Camille Samonte shows us in this report just how different this year's yearly tradition will be. Let's watch this.
Due to the threat of COVID-19, only 300 people per service will be allowed inside the Quiapo Church to ensure social distancing. Churchgoers are required to wear face masks and face shields during the Mass. Devotees will also be asked to write down their contact details for contact tracing purposes. Markers are in place to observe physical distancing. Chairs are color-coded to control foot traffic after the Mass. The homily and singing of hymns are also shortened. Devotees are not allowed to line up during the communion ritual. The priest will hand it over to them in their seats. The church has also allotted 15 minutes every after service for disinfection. Quiapo Church will also conduct more masses to accommodate more devotees. For those who may not be able to enter Quiapo Church due to limited capacity, the Manila LGU will sponsor an 8 p.m. Mass at Liwasang Bonifacio. The masses will also be live streamed on Facebook and other social media sites for those in their homes.
Yung intention of attending the Mass and the intention of praying sa bahay through the use of social media and online masses is the same as praying doon personally dito sa simbahan. Ang tinitingnan naman ng Diyos dito yung puso ng tao at kagustuhan ng tao na mapalapit sa Kanya, makapagpasalamat at makapagpuri. So, walang kabawasan doon.
Malacanang also encourages the devotees to be vigilant and responsible when attending Mass.
Alam ko naman po na bilang mga Kristiyano, importante itong Simbang Gabi, pero dahil tayo nga po ay mga Kristiyano, no, meron din tayong obligasyon na pangalagaan ang ating kalusugan.
It is a well-known belief among the Catholic faithful that completing the 9-day novena masses leads to a fulfillment of one's wish or request. Even with the COVID-19 pandemic still around, some devotees are not ready to forgo this tradition.
Takot din kami. Kaso nga lang ngayon kasi naisip namin na nasa pag-iingat pa din. Kunwari, maraming tao, medyo lumalayo kami. Din talaga, nasa pag-iingat din. Kasi kung mag-iingat din tayo, tapos wala rin tayong dasal, baka mawala rin yung pag-iingat natin. Siyempre, kung mag-iingat tayo, sama na rin natin ng dasal para sa sarili natin, sa pamilya natin.
And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow, 8 p.m. Signal channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. We have 10 days to go before Christmas. Tuloy pa rin ang Pasko, kapatid. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.
Tayo'y maging liwanag ng Pasko.